Welcome to Kettlebell Corner, where strength meets theory, where we take you on a deeper dive into all things kettlebells. I'm Jeremiah Waylon, and he's Roger Parks. And today, everybody, if you're able to, hold your breath right now. We're going to talk about breathing and some of the things you might be doing wrong and why it's important at various stages in your programming and your training altogether. Roger, how you breathing, buddy?
You told me to hold my breath.
Oh, yeah. If you're holding your breath still, release that breath, okay? unless you're underwater, then keep holding it.
I'm breathing well, actually. I've been working with a new app. Been working with a few different types, but it's I'm breathing well at the moment.
What is this app you speak of?
I don't know.
Is it the Bells app?
No, it's not the Bells app.
Okay, you download that for free from the Apple App Store.
I don't remember what it's called, but it's designed to do a few different things. It does increases your tolerance to CO2, can work on things like breath holds, and these are all different tools. And we'll probably talk about, maybe we'll turn this into a second one, talk about the different things you can do with your breath. I was actually thinking the other day, do you remember when you got into the big, into Wim Hof?
Yeah. I held my breath for over 4 minutes using that guy's protocol. And then I had to tape my mouth shut for 3 years.
And you what?
And then I had to start taping my mouth shut for 3 years.
Yeah. We should talk about that next time. But that was interesting. That was the thing I noticed after you did that breathing is you started breathing through your mouth again.
Yeah, because like that whole premise is to go, I mean, it was pretty crazy. Like it did get like, it was like, I wrote it down somewhere, but it was like over 4 minutes and like your body feels really weird. And, you know, Michelle would be like, Michelle's my wife in case you don't know, but she would be like, what are you doing on the floor? Why are you breathing like that down there? What's going on in here? I'm like, trust me, this is for fitness.
The interesting thing about it was, I've never used his breathing techniques, and I know people who have used them successfully. It's just, the idea is just like everything, context and using things where they fit in for a particular purpose. You, sir, went too far with it and screwed yourself up.
I never do that.
And for those of you who don't know, what he means is I always do that.
Yeah, I eventually find my lane, but sometimes I have to go 100 miles an hour in the wrong one for a little bit, but it all works out in the end. What the hell was that? All right, so Roger, let's use this episode to lay some of the groundwork. Let's start off. Let's talk about the phases of a program and building a program, and just sort of like why the breathing fits into this, and maybe we'll pick the phase to talk about today.
Well, breathing, I think you can use breathing in any phase, but these are very loose. This is not, some fancy, well-accepted categorization. But if you're gonna begin a program, or you're thinking about doing something, one of the steps that almost everybody skips is, am I prepared to do this? Do I have the physical ability to do this? And unfortunately, the answer in most cases, and I've been training for a long time now, in most cases, the answer is no. No, you are not. But you do it anyway. You skip right to the second step. Mm-hmm. But you should check to see if you have the range of motion you need. Are you physically prepared for the task ahead? Then you start to layer on some capacity to do more work, some strength work, maybe some basic conditioning work. That goes, we'll call it cardio for lack of a more specific focus right now. And then we can specialize. Then we can get really, really good at the thing that we're trying to do. So let's say you want to lift something really heavy. You're going for some sort of PR, maybe a deadlift. So the first phase might be, let's get you prepared. Let's see, are you like, can you move the way you're supposed to move? Can you actually access your hips? Can you get into the position that the deadlift requires? So that's going to be that first phase, and that's what we'll talk about today. Then after that, you're going to do some deadlifting, right? You're going to build, maybe you want to build a little muscle because you realize that getting stronger might help you. So you build a little muscle, you start doing maybe some higher rep stuff. For those of you who don't know, generally when you do strength work, it tends to be lower repetition with higher weight. But let's say you spend some time at lower weight with more reps, so you're building some basic capacity. Am I ready? Am I ready to really load up and deadlift heavier? And then maybe you'll specialize, and that's when you really get into the bulk of your work. And the idea is that you should be benefiting all throughout. That you don't need to just stick in with one objective. So while you're building your readiness, in some cases, you can be building capacity as well. But that gets more into a programming. That gets more into a programming focus, which I don't want to do. What I want to focus on now is how does breathing tie into readiness? That's the specific thing that we're going to talk about. Go ahead.
No.
You were going to say something.
Well, I just was taking a breath because I'm getting ready. Am I playing that one out too much here? Okay.
so what
are some things we could consider when we get started with this readiness phase and incorporating the breathing into this? Like, I know I'm supposed to breathe in my lungs, of course, but how does my belly factor? What muscles do I use? Is my biceps involved? Break it down.
For some people, yes, unfortunately. When you're looking into readiness for, an exercise program, any type of movement, you'll look at what most people just call posture. And, I hesitate when I say some of these things because they're not great descriptors of what's going on. And when we say words like posture, people seem to think that they know what it means.
Everybody just sat up a little taller right now.
Yeah. They seem to think they know what it means, and they might in some context, but not in another. So I'm a little reluctant to say things like that. But we can talk about posture. We can talk about your physical shape, your body's ability to access different positions, which is probably a little more specific. Your breathing ties into your body's ability to move. Okay, so if we're looking to increase muscle or strength or even endurance and work capacity, you need to be able to access certain tissues. And your breathing has a direct impact on these things. If you breathe poorly, if you're not using the muscles that you ought to use, then that's going to change your alignment. And then that becomes a loop. That change in alignment becomes poor breathing, which negatively impacts your alignment, which negatively impacts your breathing. And you've got to find a way in to fix this ultimately. So I think one of the best places to start is to understand how to use your diaphragm. And let's just talk about what that is. What's a diaphragm?
Well, it's this muscle that sits, I think it sits like underneath your lungs. And then as it contracts and it'll expand the lungs to fill them, and then maybe not contract, but as it pulls down, it's going to fill your lungs up. Your lungs, believe it or not, aren't actually filling themselves, if I'm correct in that. And then it's going to, as you breathe out, I'm not correct. That's fine. We'll clean this up somewhere.
You're mostly correct.
As you breathe out, the diaphragm will then push back up into the lungs and exhaust the carbon monoxide or whatever it is, carbon dioxide, not monoxide. If you're breathing out carbon monoxide, this is going to set off all kinds of sensors in your apartment.
Okay, so that's mostly right. And
that's good enough for government work.
It is. And this is very, very similar to most of the definitions that you're going to get. So, as Jeremiah said, your diaphragm is a muscle. And when it's in its relaxed position, it looks a little bit like an open parachute. It has a dome. So open parachute, maybe a round umbrella, the top of a light bulb, whatever you want. Something that's got even the top of this microphone that I'm talking into. And it's a 3-dimensional structure. And it's really important to think about. You have something smart to say. What do you have to say?
I was going to say your head.
Yes, definitely like my head. Yeah, there you go.
If you're only listening to this, Roger's bald.
Picture my head as a relaxed diaphragm.
Picture his head inside your body.
but it's a really a sheet. So you might even think about a plastic bag that's been, inflated. It's not just a one-dimensional, two-dimensional thing. It's 3D, and it fills up that entire space underneath your lungs, and it does attach. It does attach to your spine, which becomes relevant when we get into this idea of how it can affect your ability to move. And the diaphragm, it has a tendon, a central tendon, and it kind of does this weird, I don't want to get into this because it's just confusing, but it kind of does this weird thing where it pulls itself, it kind of attaches to itself and shortens, and it goes from this open parachute position to a flat position. So it'll go from an up position to a down position. And it also attaches to the ribs as well. So it's got some attachments all the way around the body. What's important to realize, especially for what I'm going to explain in a bit, is the diaphragm does not pull air into the body, and that's a common thought. What the diaphragm does is it gets out of the way, and getting out of the way is really important because we need to understand that there are other ways to make space in the lungs. Right. And that's really what we're talking about. So when the diaphragm contracts, when it's in its relaxed position, it's pushing up against the bottom of the lungs. Underneath the diaphragm, you also have your guts, your internal organs. So the whole thing is going to sit on your pelvis, which is going to be like kind of a big fruit bowl. It's going to have all of your organs on top of that. The diaphragm is going to be on top of the organs, and the lungs will be on top of the diaphragm. The atmosphere that we're in has pressure. We don't think about it because when we breathe in, we don't feel, we don't feel that the air around us is really much different. But if you were to go underwater, for example, things are going to feel a little different. If you're going to go way up to the top of a high mountain, you would also feel that the pressure actually changes a little bit. So atmospheric pressure is it's the pressure of the air trying to, it's pushing around us. And when the diaphragm is in its relaxed position and it's on the bottom of up against the lungs, your internal system, your body has a particular pressure that isn't going to change. In order for things to change, the diaphragm needs to get out of the way. So the diaphragm doesn't pull air in, and that's kind of a common myth. What it does is it gets out of the way. Air is going to flood into your rib cage no matter what. Right.
Which is probably why, like, if you're on like a ventilator or something, they're just pumping air in. Your diaphragm's probably not doing all that much.
I would imagine it's not. I honestly never looked into it, but
hey, homework for this week, okay?
Okay, yes, sir. So the job of the diaphragm is to get out of the way, and when it gets out of the way, the atmosphere around us will flood into the lungs. Why this is an important point is for us to breathe, for air to get into the lungs, we just need to change pressure. And there are different ways to do that. There are some that we could call wrong. There's some that we could call right. The diaphragm is what we call the primary respiratory muscle. It's the main one we want to use. Does everybody use it? Not well. Some people, yes, some people no. And there are two strategies in particular. This gets a lot more nuanced, but I don't think we really need to get that deep into this. There are two main strategies that I see regularly with the diaphragm. And one, they both would be considered dysfunctional. And I'll explain why I would consider them dysfunctional. One is when we breathe with the neck and the shoulders, and the other one is when we breathe with the belly. And, a lot of people are already going to start hating me because, I thought belly breathing was super healthy. And it's like, well, it depends on what you mean by belly breathing. But the answer to that question is no, it's not in most cases, not from what I've seen. And I'll qualify and explain. Any questions on that so far?
No, so far it seems pretty straightforward. The diaphragm changes the pressure in our body, makes room.
Yep.
It doesn't change the pressure, but it just makes room.
Yes, it gets out of the way. It gets out of the way. And it does change. It does it does change the internal pressure so the atmosphere from outside can flood in. That's what we want. So all we need is something in the body to move to change pressure. So which one do you want to start with? You want to start from the neck and the shoulders, or do you want to start with the belly?
Yeah, I've done them all. So let's start with the neck and the shoulders.
So we have other muscles that are accessory respiratory muscles, and it's not wrong to use them,
You're
but
talking about our
it's
scalenes?
so aggressive. Let's just call them neck muscles, and
Okay.
let's just.
But that is
let's,
one neck muscle. I
that is a
do
neck
know
muscle.
anatomy.
So let's talk about muscles that go from the neck and attach at the top of the rib cage. And what they do is they, rather than the bottom of the rib cage moving, which is the diaphragm, rather than the diaphragm moving to allow the air to come in, what the neck muscles do is they actually lift the rib cage up. And when you lift the rib cage, that's going to change the internal pressure, and it's going to allow air to come into your lungs. So the problem with that is these, again, are accessory respiratory muscles. They're not your primary, and they are really subject to being overloaded. So when you see people who tend to breathe with their mouths open, when you see a lot of changes in the face structure and the jaw structure, this is somebody who tends to or tended to breathe through their necks quite a bit, and they were not using the diaphragm, or at least not using the diaphragm well. So that's one way that we can change pressure. It works. People aren't dead. I mean, that's usually when I talk to a client about like, oh, hey, we're going to do some breathing. Like, I can breathe just fine. I'm not dead. Like, yes, you've all told me the same joke for years and years and years. It's just not funny.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's how we do it with the neck. Now, the problem with that is the neck muscles can get tight chronically. They can change the position of the head. When muscles have what we call an origin and an insertion. They've got a place where they begin and a place where they end. And who really cares which is which? This is all kind of made up stuff, but they have a finite length. And when muscles contract, they shorten. So one end, imagine, even just a piece of Scotch tape, right? One end gets closer to the other end, and that's how muscles shorten. So if you have a muscle that begins on the neck or attaches to the jaw, and then also attaches to the ribs, when those muscles become tight and chronically shortened, they're going to pull your head forward. That's going to change your center of mass, where it's sitting over your base of support. It'll compromise your balance. It's going to move your rib cage. Your rib cage is when the rib cage changes position, that's going to alter the position of the scapula. The scapula connects to the humerus, which is the arm bone. And now all of a sudden, because you are a poor breather, you don't have overhead mobility, and your overhead press is garbage. So there are downstream consequences, which are very, very easy to tease out. So not only are you not optimizing your breathing, which we'll get into now when we get into things like capacity and even more advanced strategies, you do need to breathe well because you're trying to be efficient with oxygen and make your body do more with less. But you have changed your readiness. You've changed your ability to go overhead. So in this case, if you're not breathing well, your shoulders probably don't work as well as they ought to.
Makes sense.
And I can trace 5 other problems that might give you, but that's kind of an easy, common one. So we're good with that.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. Now, the second way that I see, which is really common, is the belly breath. And this was taught to me a long time ago. We want to lay on our back, and when we breathe, we want to push our bellies out. And what we're doing is we're teaching ourselves how to move the diaphragm down. Okay. Totally cool. I didn't start to question the effectiveness of the belly breath until I met a particular client of mine, and he's an older guy. We started when he, I believe, was 66. So I got him on the table. I was doing, was doing some range of motion assessments, and we did some breathing. And I noticed that, this guy was a champion belly breather. Every time he would breathe, his belly would come out and forward. But his shoulders might be the tightest shoulders I've ever touched. Like his overhead range of motion is really pretty poor. And nothing really moved. So I started asking myself, okay, well, what's wrong here? The diaphragm might drop in a case like that. It might drop, but where it's dropping, there's a question: is does the whole thing drop? And I've read some things that show that the diaphragm does not always drop straight down. It might drop down and forward.
That's what I was going to say.
Meaning, yeah. So some of the muscle contracts, some of it doesn't, which can change the shape of the rib cage. Basically, you're doing all of the work with part of the muscle. That's going to change the shape of the ribs. But what was interesting is when he would breathe in, there was no expansion in his rib cage, right? That's where your lungs are. If we breathe into the belly, it really is designed to be a cue to use the diaphragm. But when you use the diaphragm should drop straight down, not just down and forward. We should use all of it, not just some of it. And the rib cage should expand when that happens. So with a proper breath, you should get expansion, yes, in the front, but you should also get expansion in the sides and the back. The diaphragm dropping needs, for a healthy breath, needs to be opposed by sufficient abdominal tone. And by abdominals, I mean everything all around, front, back, and sides. Now, that doesn't mean super braced or super hard or super stiff. There just needs to be enough tone in those muscles to contain the drop of the diaphragm. Because if your diaphragm's dropping straight down and you have no abdominal tension and all of your guts are shooting forward, then you're going to get what a lot of people call rib flare. The ribs might lift up, or will lift up. Your internal organs are going to spill forward. And the analogy I use with this is, imagine a bunch of meat in a plastic bag. When it sits on one side of that bag's going to stretch over time. So you see a bulging stomach, everything's coming forward. So maybe the diaphragm's working, but only part of the way, and it's completely unopposed. So one, you have a unwanted shape change of the system, right? Your whole body is changing to accommodate this breathing. And what you'll find over time is people will get sometimes a big arch in the low back. They might develop some back pain, but they have no real tension. And as we get deeper into the kettlebell system, let's go back to even that idea of overhead pressing. If we want to get tight, but we don't have the ability to oppose the diaphragm and to contain the guts as they drop down, they're supposed to drop toward the pelvic diaphragm. If we don't have the tension to contain that, then we get changes. The pelvis will often tip forward. The ribs will lift up. This isn't the only compensation, but it's common. Now, all of a sudden, the muscles that attach to the rib cage, that attach to the pelvis, they've altered length. So people might feel, oh, my hamstrings are really tight. You could feel tight hamstrings because you have a breathing problem. Your abdominal organs are pushing forward. Your pelvis tilts anteriorly. The bottom of the pelvis, they're called your ischial tuberosities. That's where your hamstrings attach. Now they are relative to your feet on the ground, farther away from the floor than they were. That's going to make your hamstrings feel stretched. And you can stretch your hamstrings all day long until you, until you fix the breathing problem, shove your organs back where they belong and learn how to breathe so the diaphragm drops. When it's properly opposed by your abdominal muscles, you're not going to be able to fix that problem sufficiently.
And so consequently, both of those are like essentially shallow breaths. You're going to get a shallow breath with your belly breathing, even though you think you might not be filling your lungs as much, even though you think you're breathing in deeper. Definitely a shallower breath in the neck breathing.
In both cases, yes. Yeah. In both cases, what you're going to find is because you're displacing, the pressure is not moving straight down. It's moving forward. That's where the bulge is happening. Your lungs are not going to fill the same capacity. You're still going to get air. Obviously you're breathing. I'm not saying you're not, but either the rib cage is not going to rise as much as it normally would when the diaphragm drops straight down, or it's going to look like it's not even rising at all. So the analogy I like to use for this, our buddy Zach Couples, when he was teaching human,
Holla, fam.
the human matrix. I didn't get it because he didn't, he used a syringe as a prop, but he didn't explain it this way. And it took me a little while to just kind of put this together on my own. What I like about the syringe, and it was kind of a fat one. Okay. So just, like you would, like you're giving yourself a giant shot. Okay.
Mhm.
It's circular, right? We have this tube, which is like us. We are a tube, more or less.
A meat tube.
We are a meat tube. So we have this cylinder and we have this plunger. And if you want to fill up a syringe, obviously you're going to put the needle in the vial or whatever. You're going to pull the plunger down, and when the plunger moves, it just makes space. That fluid has pressure, right? It's got its own pressure. It's just going to flood into the space of the syringe. It doesn't need to be pulled. You just need to move it out of the way, and that's what should happen when we breathe. And just like the plunger should be contained within the cylinder of the syringe, our diaphragm should be contained within the cylinder of us, of our midsection. So we want to think about a few things that we can do to learn how to drop the diaphragm to make room in the rib cage so the rib cage can expand. If we're looking at, as far as I know, any human system, they all benefit from motion, from movement. If your rib cage can't continually contract and expand, expand and contract, if it can't, get bigger and smaller, it's going to get stiff.
Yeah.
And when we go overhead, there's certain things that need to happen at the rib cage in order to accommodate that motion. The rib cage needs to change position. So if we're not going through all these breath cycles, roughly 20,000 times a day, and the ribs get stiff and they can't change position, guess what? You lost overhead motion. Or guess what? Your pelvis isn't in the right place. My hip flexors are tight. My hamstrings are tight. These are as often, in my experience, breathing problems as they are anything else. And it's a complex of things. It's not, it's not just, hey, fix your breathing and then fix the thing. But usually there's an input there.
Got it. So what are some of the things that somebody can do to fix your breathing? Because we know how important, like, the bracing is and the different levels of bracing for these kettlebell skills, and particularly that going overhead and having control over there and these sort of things. Is it a matter of laying down on your stomach and doing like box breathing and the crocodile breathing sort of position or whatever they would call it? Or
those are different starts. But before we get into this idea of bracing, I do want people to understand that when you do something that many times a day, and when your body is in a specific position and it can't get out of that position, you're not just getting to the point, you're not just up against this idea of, I can't brace well. You're in a position where you cannot move, where your pelvis is already, if you think about, you're standing up on your 2 feet and the bottom of your pelvis is essentially pinched by the necks of your femurs, your leg bones. And as the pelvis rotates around those bones, you have a certain amount of flexion and extension at that joint. The degree to which a pelvis will tilt forward or back is already using up some of those degrees of motion. So if your poor breathing causes an anterior tilt of the pelvis, that's motion you can't use to squat. So forget about this idea, I can't brace. Think about, I can't move.
Right.
Because that's a lot more important. So let's really set the tone there. Because if you can't control your abdominal contents, if you can't control your abdominal organs, if you can't breathe well, you cannot move well. Okay. Now you can try to find, ways around that.
That's called compensation.
It is. And sometimes it works perfectly fine. It doesn't usually work well for long. But if you look at athletes, they're fantastic at compensation, but they tend to be in a lot of pain, especially later in life. So back to your question specifically, I think one of the first things that may be helpful to do, if let's say you fall into the first category, you're a mouth breather, which tends to be, your jaws open, that often indicates that your neck muscles are tight and they're constantly pulling on the jaw. Something simple to do is to just put some, they don't need to be super heavy or crazy or anything. But you can just sit comfortably and put some dumbbells in your hands. So you feel just enough weight where they want to pull your shoulders down. And we're not looking to you're not looking, don't need someone to stand on them and force them down. You're just looking for feedback. If your natural tendency is to lift your chest, or lift your shoulders and your neck when you breathe, the dumbbells in your hand are going to make you a little bit more aware of that. And then the idea from that point is going to be learning how to use the diaphragm. We'll get to that in a second. A strategy that can be helpful, has been helpful for me and for some of my students and clients who've been willing to use it, is mouth taping. That discourages breathing through the mouth, obviously, because your mouth is taped. And I was really reluctant to do it, but I do it every night now.
I do it. And then my wife is like, "Are you about to be kidnapped? What's going on here?" And she's like, "Oh, the sexiest thing in the world is to look over and see your mouth taped shut."
Yeah. Our partners can always be very supportive.
I did it for 3 years, and I think I ran out of tape, and I haven't bought any new ones. So it's been, I think, maybe a month since I've stopped doing it. I was like, well, let me see what's up. Let me see what the difference is. And I will say, I don't notice it so much when I sleep. However, I do notice if I'm just sitting around doing nothing, I resort to my old Neanderthal ways,
Mhm.
or is my significant other, as you put it, Roger, is an actor, and she said whenever they wanted us to play dumb, they just would say, "Drop your lower jaw open." So she'll be like, "What's up, dummy?" So perhaps I got to get back on that train, because I guess, like, if you're doing something 20,000 times a day, these, like, the overnight taping of it is a good trainer in my mind. I
Mhm.
feel like that's probably a really solid trainer, because you're getting 8 hours or whatever, 7 hours or 6 hours of sleep with that happening, as opposed to the 2 minutes you might do prior to your training session to kind of bring awareness to it.
Sure, and that doesn't mean you're going to fix the problem, but it does mean for those 8 hours you are not making it worse, likely.
True.
So it's worth a $2 roll of tape.
Yeah. And if you want, read that book by James Nestor, that is it Breathe? Uh,
Yeah.
that's a wild book.
Well, I do like that book, and why I like that book is, it was written from the standpoint of someone who's trying out breathing. He's not pretending to be an expert. He acknowledges that he isn't, but he does talk to a lot of different experts, um, who have a different focus. Wim Hof breathing is different than, um, is different than, the oxygen advantage is another great
Oh, yeah,
book,
that's a
and
good one.
they talk more about reducing your sensitivity to CO2. You've got views that are not necessarily antagonistic, but they have different focuses. So he goes over lots of different breathing methods, and there's some cool stuff they do with breathing in yoga to induce different mind states, and there's all kinds of stuff you can do. But that is a cool book. Anyway, back to interventions. Um, the next thing that I think is important to do is to feel what it's like to have your whole body, pressurized properly. And usually where people lose pressure is through the front. If they're breathing poorly, if the shoulders and the neck aren't lifting, it's coming forward through the belly. So what Jeremiah mentioned was crocodile breathing, which is really just laying on your belly and breathing. I like using a pillow or Airx pads, or there's a specific ab mat that you get on Amazon. I think it's Spry, SPRI, that you can lay on. So not only are you using the pressure from the ground, right? If you're laying on the ground, you can't your belly can't go forward too much. So you're creating a constraint. Your pressure has to go somewhere else, and it's going to go into your sides and your back. So I like to do that even more. So I lay on the pillows, or I lay on the Airx pads face down. I'll just put my hands underneath my face, so I don't crush my nose. Or you can get another pad to make sure you're nice and comfortable. I'll hang out there for a while. You just won't, keep your shoulders down and think about expanding into your sides and back. And often, I've actually never had a client I've worked with who is not able to feel something in that position. Just hang out there long enough and things just kind of reset, because you limit your body's ability to breathe. in the normal way, so it has to figure it out. And obviously, if you're feeling breathless or uncomfortable, then you've got to go into it a little slower. But I do like the crocodile breathing, or the breathing on the pads. The one thing that I will say, what a lot of people get wrong is they focus first on the inhale. They focus first on what they think is breathing air in or getting the diaphragm out of the way. What has worked best for me and other people is learning how to exhale. Because when you exhale, the diaphragm relaxes. And if you want it to contract, it's got to contract from a relaxed position. So getting into that position face down and thinking about letting your air fall out. If your diaphragm's functioning properly, you should just let it relax, and it's going to help to push the air out. It doesn't need to be an active thing. In the beginning, it might. So think about breathing out, 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 push, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. You probably have more air in there. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. And then eventually you'll feel your rib cage will physically get smaller. And then you can kind of let the cushions of the pad pushing everything back against you, the floor creating pressure. So your stomach isn't just pushing forward, and then you'll start to feel expansion in your sides and your back. And then you can use your hands as targets eventually. So once I do that, then I'll move someone into a seated position. And when I move someone into a seated position, it's a little closer to standing up. It's not the same, right? We're taking the complexity of the, if we think about it, we're not using the foot and ankle joints. We're not using the knee. We're not using the hip the same way. We're just basically pelvis up. So in a seated position, you want to rock to a point where you're feeling what a lot of people call the sit bones. Again, these are the ischial tuberosities, the bones on the bottom of the pelvis. And when you can feel those up against the seat, you know that you're basically, your pelvis is straight up and down. It's not tipped too far forward. It's not tipped too far back. It's right where it should be. And then you can take your hands and you can put them on your sides, and you can think about expanding, because when the diaphragm drops, right, it's going to push down, and it's going to push your organs out. So when it pushes your organs out, it should do so three-dimensionally, 360 degrees. So if your diaphragm drops, you should feel your organs at the sides of your body, right, push out. You should feel your back pushing out. So everything is kind of even in 360. You should also feel your rib cage expand. So you can think about the diaphragm dropping, 3D expansion, and for every little bit that you feel expansion at the bottom in the midsection, you should also feel the rib cage expanding as well. Now, this is something I had a hard time with at first, because I was taught belly breathing in contrast to chest breathing. Oh, you don't want to be a chest breather, but that's where your lungs are located.
Turns out.
Okay. we're breathing, and we're breathing into the lungs. So yes, we're using the diaphragm to push down, but the chest does need to fill. So we're not talking about the chest filling first. Okay. We're talking about learning to drop the diaphragm, expansion all the way around it. As that drops, the air is coming into the rib cage, and the rib cage is expanding. So you should see the bottom part, the midsection, expand slightly before the rib cage starts to fill, or at the same time. You should not have the rib cage expanding without the midsection getting tight and pushing into you. Okay.
And do you recommend people do this naked?
Usually, and send
Okay.
videos.
Noted.
It's important.
Yeah.
It's not a bad idea to do without a shirt on.
Yeah,
so you can see what's going on.
I was a little tongue in cheek, but yeah, you could see a lot more if you don't have a big belly shirt on. Now,
and if one more thing, if you feel the bottoms of your ribs, and you can really hook underneath prominently your rib cage, there's a good chance that you're not really opposing your breath with your midsection. And this can change over time, but if you can really hook under your ribs, you're probably not using your diaphragm, or at least not all of it, to breathe.
And that means you're not going to be able to live much longer, and I hate to deliver that news to you. Just
Yes,
kidding.
thank you for the being the bearer of bad news.
Yes.
But those are, those are some basic strategies that you can begin with. But just remember, breathing in for me, if I think about the plunger dropping to make space, that's just like the diaphragm dropping to make space. You're not pulling air in, you're just getting it out of the way. And if you're getting it out of the way and you're pushing everything down, you're actually the your abdominal contents, your organs do push down into your pelvic floor, and your pelvic floor muscles will expand as well. So a lot of the tension that we have in our hips is because when we breathe, we never breathe down into the pelvis. Now, obviously, you don't have air going down there, but nothing's pushing down there, nothing's contracting and expanding those muscles. So they always just stay tight and rigid. And that can be another thing that registers as tightness.
Very good. So I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, 3 big things that you can do is you can do the opposed breathing on your laying. I'm going to use a technical term. Okay.
Mhm.
Oh shit! It just escaped me. I know supine is up, and then the other one was
Prone.
prone. Thank you. In a prone position, is like, one of those things you never break that term out because nobody gives a crap about these terms. But so you're in a prone position, you're laying on your belly with. Roger likes the RX pad or that, so it's probably like a domed little ab mat pad sort of thing.
It's got a little bit of a curve to it.
Little curvature,
Yeah.
or a pillow or whatever you got.
Mhm.
You don't need to buy something for this. Your hands under your forehead with a focus on the exhale
First, yes.
as a main emphasis. Get all that air out and then start to begin to work that breathing into your back and sides. Yes, you'll still feel some in the front, but it's going to have a lot less room when you're not jutting your belly out like some Midwestern farmer. Shout out to you Midwestern farmers who love their old style. You know what I mean? And then from there, you can progress it to a seated position. Make sure on it feels uncomfortable on those sit bones, and then that's going to give you that alignment most likely. And then you're breathing back. And I would say, are you putting your back against the chair at all, or no?
If that's what you need to do in order to stay balanced, but you don't want to lay back against the chair too much, it can provide feedback. So the chair I'm sitting in now, I'm not really pushing back, but if you push back hard enough, it's gonna be a similar thing like you laying face down on the floor. And we're laying face down because we're trying to limit the expansion in the front. In most cases, we don't want to limit the expansion in the back. We usually need more expansion back there. So if you're putting too much pressure against the back of the chair, you might limit that, and you don't want to do that. So ideally, I'd have you sit on, if you're in a gym, you're probably either on the edge of the chair or you're probably sitting on a weight bench or something like that.
Copy. And then if you're like a neck breather, you could give some external resistance with, I don't know, some 5-pound dumbbells or something, 2 pounds, 3 pounds.
It's a kettlebell podcast.
Oh yeah, kettlebells.
Let's not lose complete sight of that.
All right, but here's the thing. I know everybody listening to this is a beast, and so they may not have these light kettlebells laying around. So go to your children's closet and get their dumbbells, okay? And then hold them to give those shoulders, give them a little bit of resistance, pull down so you can breathe through without that elevation of the upper ribs and shoulders.
And look, there are so many ways to do this. This is just a way. This is a drill that I've had success with getting people aware of not breathing through the neck and the shoulders. And usually, this is one of those things you just tell people they're doing it to stop, and they do. But as a resource, these are just a few things that you can do. I do highly recommend checking out Zach Couples' work on YouTube, because he has tons of videos. You can do the same drill that I told you on the stomach. You can do it on your back, and you can do it while you're pushing your feet into the floor, which will work on your pelvic position, which, there's some benefit to learning how to breathe in a particular position while you were also pushing your feet down. You can get your glutes active. There are lots of ways to do it. And really, really good drills for many, many different positions.
Yeah, I'll link Zach's YouTube to this in the video description and the podcast description. So go have fun, explore. He's a well of knowledge. Is that how you say that? Is it well or wealth, Roger?
Usually it's wealth, but
Well, he's also a well. Put an S in
we
front of
did
it, and he's swell.
we had him on the podcast, when we were doing the old format. You could probably link that episode down there
Yeah,
too.
I'll put
I'm
that one in
sure
there.
I'm sure he said something that's at least halfway relevant.
Yeah, and he has that cool skeleton guy in the background. But yeah, there's a lot of tactics, and we'll expand more on this as these episodes go on. But definitely the readiness aspect and your breathing are going to correlate. And I hope you understand when Roger mentioned at the beginning, like when you're out of alignment, everything else tends to not be out of alignment. And kettlebells involve a lot of overhead, and you should do this and get better. Tape your mouth at night,
Or
if
else.
or else you need a CPAP even. Anyways, there's lots of breathing. Thank you for listening. Anything else, Roger?
No, I think we've with the yes, but no, we're good for
Yes,
now.
but no. So stay tuned for part 2 and maybe even part 3. But thanks for listening, and be sure to download the Bells app, post those comments, send those videos, otherwise we're going to go find your video and then start breaking it down. Because you put it on the
Yeah,
internet, we can do whatever we want with it. Didn't you know that?
naked breathing videos. Let's see them.
Okay. Tonight happens to be my breathing practice night. So here we go. All right. Thanks for listening, and stay strong, y'all.